All right, good morning. Good morning. We're going to get right to it. We have a newsmaker out of the gate on this Monday morning. Good morning, New Hampshire. Now we're up into Portland, Maine. Good morning, Maine. Good morning, New England. Good morning, worldwide. Monday morning. Hey, Alexa. Hey, Google, play the pulse of an H. Hope you had a good weekend. Lot going on. And we're going to bring in a newsmaker out of the gate. She really doesn't need any new introduction or more introduction here in New Hampshire, her home. She is the White House press secretary for President Donald Trump. Caroline Levitt joining us live. The Pulse of an H. Jack Heath, J Dog, and the boards out of the gate. Good morning, Caroline. Well, we actually have milder temperatures coming up this week. So if you get a chance to come home and go to the beach, you won't go to the beach yet. Caroline, I want to talk right away. There was that now, it depends how you look at it, famous or infamous luncheon of governors, bipartisan governors luncheon with President Trump at the end of last week. And the president asked if Governor Mills of Maine was in attendance. She was, she said here. And he basically asked her, I hear you're not intending to comply on our federal order banning men to play in women's sports. And she basically said that was the case. He mentioned federal funding withholding it, but what's the latest? She since then is saying that the Trump administration cannot withhold federal funds to Maine that were passed by Congress as taxpayers, and yet there are a couple of investigations going on Maine as recently as a track meet on where a boy or male was allowed to play in female sports. What is the latest from the White House point of view on this, Caroline? Right. Well, if Maine continues to defy that order locally in the state of Maine, what would the offense be that the Trump administration could do to take the next step? Can you actually withhold funds prior to a court date? Caroline Levitt, I want to ask you, speaking of Governor Mills in Maine, a separate topic. She, in 2023, made this big push for windmills in the Gulf of Maine, floating windmills. I've had the New England fishermen on my show a lot. It looks like it was a complete disaster if they ever did that, including off of Portsmouth up into the Gulf of Maine. You know those waters. That's home to you. In terms of the whales, the marine life, the actual makeup of the ocean for these cables and the discharge of floating windmills. The President Trump has signed an executive order banning such windmills. The New Hampshire House this past week passed a measure to roll back any proposed floating windmills. Will there be windmills in the Gulf of Maine as Governor Mills wants? Speaking of Maine, yes or no? Caroline, I know you have a tight schedule. Just real quickly, 3 years, the war in Ukraine now. I know the president's hosting the French leader today. European leaders are meeting with President Zelensky in Ukraine. This continues. Very apparent that Secretary of State Rubio and your administration are trying to broker an agreement to end the war. How do you respond to New Hampshire U.S. Senator Jean Shaheen saying recently that President Trump appears weak and is showing weakness by appeasing Putin and trying to end this war? Mhm. Right. Right. Caroline Levitt, I heard a rumor that federal workers actually have to be back in the office today or this week. Is that true? Right. Hey, Hey, I know it's only just over a month in, but you've taken this White House press secretary job by storm by most accounts. And anyone who doesn't say that is probably just not a very pleasant person. My question to you is youngest press secretary, you've heard this, probably getting tired of hearing this in history. Just tell us real quick, 30 seconds. What's the most surprising thing, Caroline Levitt, you have found after a month plus of being the White House press secretary for President Trump? What's the most surprising thing that comes to your mind? Yeah. Thank you, Caroline Levitt, White House Press Secretary, live. Good morning, New Hampshire, the Pulse of an Age. Thank you. So, just a summation of Caroline Levitt, because there's been this sort of jousting between President Trump and the governor of Maine, Governor Mills. And the funny thing is, there's a New York Times. It's all you ever remember when someone would say that if you witness a car accident or two cars that might bump or collide, depending on who you are, you might have a different version of the incident. Well, the New York Times does this piece over the weekend, sort of bravado for Governor Mills of Maine standing up against President Trump on this men playing in women's sports. Going to defy the administration. We'll see you in court. You just heard Caroline Levitt saying that the Trump administration will soon go on offense if the state of Maine defies this order. And again, I don't know. The jury's out. I know that there's a poll that more Democrat leaders want to see more Democrat governors, like the governor of New York. We haven't heard much, have we, from Governor Healy in Massachusetts? Has anyone heard from her? I haven't heard much, but the governor of New York is now openly poking back at the Trump administration on a lot of the changes after a month plus. But the interesting thing is, I'm sure on the liberal side of politics, there's a lot of people rooting for Governor Mills of Maine. I just have a question, because one thing Caroline Levitt said just now live, White House press secretary speaking on behalf of the White House and the President Trump, she said it's a 90-10 issue, meaning 90%, 9 out of 10 people think it's not right for boys or men to compete in women's sports. 9 out of 10. So the question is, you can cheer all you want that Governor Mills is fighting on this hill, but is that a hill you politically want to fight and die on? I'm just asking. It's a question. The other thing I don't understand, I was thinking this over the weekend. Saw a great clip the other night. It was on or about the time of the U.S. Canada Four Nation hockey final at TD Garden, and Billie Jean King, the great, great, great tennis player and early maverick in women's sports, came into the locker room of I think they're called the, I don't know if it's Fleet something, but the professional women's hockey team in Boston. They're trying to get going, and they're incredible women's hockey in terms of college, like UNH, great level of hockey. And she was talking about them and how proud she was, and she really was a pioneer for women's rights and girls' rights in sports, and so was Martina Navratilova, who came out recently, the great, great, also tennis player champion, and I just don't know what as a I guess I'll say this if I'm not offending anyone, but as a male, as far as I know, as a male my whole life, I don't think it's going to change, but it might. I'm kidding. As a male, I can tell you it doesn't seem right when I watch the Olympics in France and I see this guy boxing, beating up women in boxing because he says he's a woman, and I think of that Italian boxer who was in tears after fighting him, and this is in the Olympics in women's boxing, and he went on to win the gold medal. He went on to win the gold medal, and I guess my point is, why aren't more women, regardless of politics, speaking up to protect and fight for women's sports? The integrity, the sovereignty of women's sports. Why aren't more women speaking up? That's where I wonder if Governor Mills, how this will pan out. But that's just some commentary. 603-228-2080. Hey Alexa, hey Google, play the pulse of an H. Big home show week. We're going to hear from home builders today and all week long as we are bringing back the trades. Hey Alexa, hey Google, play the pulse of an H. Jack Heath, J Dog on the boards. Back in a few. All right, J Dog, we're so busy out of the gate on this Monday. Hope you had a good weekend. Got some milder temps. Did you see Wednesday's temp, even with a little bit of precipitation, J Dog? It's gonna be like in the mid to upper 40s. You could just wear a sweatshirt out there, J Dog. Oh, you didn't know this past weekend? Really? There are no trails around where people have packed it down? Yeah, yeah. Really? What? Okay. All right. Thank you, buddy. All right, we have a lot going on, and our poll question on X available, and J Dog will have the results for you from the last one. But on X at the Pulse of an H, make it easy for you. Everything's the Pulse of an H here. Streaming at the Pulse of an H, any smart device. Hey Alexa, hey Google, Pulse of an H. Our poll question on X, Pulse of an H. Who do you think is right in this sort of stand down or showdown between Governor Mills of Maine and President Trump? Who's right, President Trump or Governor Mills? Who do you support? Who do you think's right in their position? Trump saying you better comply with the federal order that men are not to compete in women's sports. And Mills saying, nope, going to go with the state order, state law, and defy it and go to court. And Trump, you just heard White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt saying that the White House can withhold federal funds to schools in Maine, something they don't want to do, but something they will do if Maine continues to defy this order. So who do you think is right in this? Trump or Mills? It's a simple, good poll question on X as we get going, J Dog. And I don't know if you have the results of the last one because I'm trying to think what it was. Is Caroline said, oh, and there you go, after 1 month. And the answer is, that's almost kind of what the national trend has been on that question, J Dog. Interesting on our poll question on X, getting a lot of activity on that. But as Caroline Leavitt said, I asked her the most surprising thing on the job thus far as press secretary for President Trump. She said it's just the volume and the speed of news every day, trying to keep up with it. It makes me feel good because I had a tough time, the last few weeks just trying to keep track of everything. I mean, it's happening in lightning speed, and a lot of it just is common sense, but it's not going to be, change. Change can happen quickly or slowly in life, but not we, but people, I think it's natural to kind of resist, to kind of sometimes push back against change, unless it's something that you've been after yourself for a long time. But change can be hard. And I'm not rationalizing here. I'm just sort of giving you my context here. But when I look at like federal workers, and please don't get mad at me if you're a federal worker, if you love your job and you've been doing it and you're passionate about it, and you believe in it, that's great. Good for you. I continue to rock on and do a great job. But I am tired of this whining from some in the federal workforce. It's become the largest single employer in our country. These buildings have been vacant for the last 3 years because of this, remote working crap in terms of don't go into the office. And you know what? I think of that one federal worker. I don't know her name, but she actually posted on her social media. I saw this on a British media outlet the week or two when President Trump signed the executive order telling federal workers it's back to the job, back to the workplace. And you just heard Caroline Leavitt speaking for the president saying, yep, this week, today, back to the workplace. Oh my goodness, what a hardship to actually go to the office. What a hardship. What a hardship. Gotta take off the PJs and playing with your dog and your cat while you're working at home. I mean, everyone likes it to a point. Technology allows people to work from pretty much anywhere. People bought homes in this state after all the COVID crap because they could work remote. And so if you can live in Plymouth, New Hampshire and look at the hills, or, live in the North Country and ski during the week, I get it to a point, but it's back to work time, and this woman posted on her social media that she was all put out. She was all worked up. She was whining that I think she worked. I remember this now for a fact. She worked in the federal court system. What? I don't know if she was a clerk, but she was whining on her social media that how was she going to continue if she had to go back to the job physically, to the courthouse physically, and leave her home? How could she continue her side job of being an influencer on Amazon? I kid you not. That was her complaint. How could she continue being an influencer on Amazon and continue with her federal job? The former administration and kind of the direction in this country created a lot of this mindset. But I think I look at again, I said this a few weeks ago in some commentary. If you don't like Donald Trump, the president in the second term, if you don't like what he ran on, if you don't like the stuff he said he was going to do, I can totally understand why you are not having any fun right now. I am not being a wise guy saying this. I totally can understand why you're in a funk. If everything he talked about you bristled from, and of course, I think one of the best questions during the run up to November 5th was Brett Baer in the Fox interview when Kamala Harris in one of her own interviews, real interviews, was just going on that Donald Trump was a threat to democracy. He was unelectable. He was going to be terrible and all these things. And Brett Baer let her finish. And he said, well, Madam Vice President, you're the nominee of the Democrats. If Trump's so terrible, if he's so awful, why is the race tied? And in some cases, why is he ahead if he's so terrible and unelectable? Why are more people resonating? Why does Trump have a better than good chance of winning the election if he's so awful, if he's so terrible? It's a good question, actually. But if you liked Washington the way it was, if you didn't mind the Mitch McConnells and the Nancy Pelosi's and the Schumers rumbling around, falling down, being in there after 50 or 40 years, here's a question I asked someone over the weekend. Here's a question I'll ask you in terms of why change is good, even if it's uncomfortable. Can you explain to me? It's my UVM math question. I say that sarcastically because I got through University of Vermont actually with a degree or a diploma, not taking any math classes, not my forte, not my passion. But on the math side, can anyone out there, can any rocket scientists out there, put your politics aside for a moment and tell me, do you even know what the salary of a United States senator is? And let's just say, give or take 20 grand, just throw the number $200,000 out there, and you're probably not far off. So can you tell me how after, $200,000 a year, after 20 or 30 years in the Senate, do the numbers. Today in inflation in the last several years, just the cost of living would chew up 60% of that. But can you tell me after 200,000 a year, how any United States senator who went in there worth less than $1 million leaves worth more than 50 million? Can anyone out there explain how they become so rich after being in Washington for decades? That's a good question. I would love that answer because do the math and the logic. If you lived in Epsom, New Hampshire, and you were working somewhere and you were making a couple hundred grand a year after 20 years in Epsom, New Hampshire, in New England working, I don't think you'd be worth 50 million bucks unless you either won the lottery, you were a heck of a real estate developer, or you were an incredible entrepreneur, because you ain't doing that in the stock market. And that's the funny thing about Nancy Pelosi and her husband. They didn't become worth 150 million bucks because he's that good of a stock trader, trust me. And they did well in real estate in San Francisco, um, do as I say, not as I do. But can you explain to me how someone in the Senate or Congress after 20 or 30 years becomes worth more than 50 million bucks in their net worth at 200 grand a year? Can anyone out there, I'm just looking for the numbers. Can anyone out there explain that to me? No. So we're gonna cut through waste. Federal workers have to go back to work, and I'm just going to continue. What are you whining about? What is so god awful right now? What is so terrible? What is so standing in your way of progressing? What's changed? New Hampshire's abortion laws haven't changed. There's no restrictions through the first 6 months. People have turned their common sense on sanctuary city bans, but what's really standing in your way? What are you so upset about? And then we'll come back and talk about this deal making to end the war in Ukraine, because it is 3 years to this day, and we'll talk about that and a whole lot more. Hey, Alexa, hey, Google, play the pulse of an age. But is 2025 becoming a slower year economically? Are things starting to slow down? Because we're coming out of February here, New Hampshire vacation week this week, and then we're into the spring, close pretty soon. But what is happening economically? Things feel to be retailers and others. There tends to be a feeling of pulling back. And one thing that I hope this administration can do is lower energy prices and lower everyday grocery prices. It is a complete must. Hey, go Google. Hey, Alexa, play the pulse of an age. Back in a moment. All right, welcome back. And more of my interview on the 10 o'clock hour. Press Secretary Caroline Levitt checking in live this morning. This show, yours truly. Good morning, New Hampshire. Good morning, Maine. Good morning, New England. Hey, Google. Hey, Alexa, play the Pulse of an H. Saying the Trump administration will soon go on the offense against the state of Maine if they continue to defy the federal order to ban men or boys playing in women and girls sports. And saying that they can do that even before a court matter. Governor Mills saying, see you in court, when President Trump asked her at that governor's luncheon at the White House if they're going to respect the federal order. So far, the answer is no. So it's sort of a stand down brewing. And that's our poll question this morning on X at the Pulse of H. Do you think President Trump is right or Governor Mills of Maine in this showdown? Because she wants to continue. I don't know what that was, J-Dog. Something fell in here. It wasn't an icicle, was it? We don't have icicles in here. She wants to continue men playing in women's sports and fight that. So pick your battles, right? Pick your battles. Did you see by the way, just under the category of, I thought we were getting over this stuff. I thought November 5th was in part a message. Did anyone catch the Wisconsin governor? Again, I don't know. These people that live in these states that vote a certain way, whether it's Maine or Massachusetts. Wisconsin Democrat governor proposes replacing the term and word mother with inseminated person in the state budget law in terms of wording on any budget dealing with mother. No longer saying husband or wife, saying spouses. There's a term for a father that's not the term father. And, when this nutty stuff was happening, because I'm sorry, to me, it's nuts. I pushed back on it on this show a couple of years ago. Former Governor Sununu called in. He was listening that day. I remember Michael Graham, New Hampshire Journal, had a story on this. I started talking. The information officer, and I may have her title wrong here in New Hampshire. We're talking New Hampshire now, not Wisconsin. The person who kind of oversaw the state of New Hampshire employee website. And you probably didn't hear about this because it was killed by Governor Sununu that day. I started talking on the show, and she had come up with a list of these pronouns and these words that she wanted replaced, like the Wisconsin governor. References to wife or husband in the budget of Wisconsin are changed to spouse, so it doesn't offend anyone. The word father is changed to parent, and the word mother has been swapped out for the phrase parent who gave birth to the child. To me, all this stuff is nuts. Now, I use the word nuts because that was Governor Sununu's word when he heard about this in New Hampshire. So I don't have it in front of me, but the story is the person who oversaw the state employee website. So if you're a state trooper or Department of Transportation worker, any state employee, and we have a lot of them, as you know, and I think for the most part, they do great work. That's not my point here. But the person who was overseeing the state employee website wanted to sort of do the same thing. So if you're I'm just going to say a DOT worker, and the storm is coming this week, and you want to talk to someone who's out in the trucks, and you want to say, hey, guy, how was your weekend? Did you catch that hockey game? She didn't want you to use the word guy, gal, woman, boy, girl, husband, wife. And even if you were, a state trooper and you stop someone on the highway and they're not, they don't show a citizenship here, she didn't want you to say the word American because it might offend a foreign national. So all this woke, nutty stuff, like Stanford University a few years ago didn't want any of the faculty or students because they hired these social governance deans, like these woke DEI deans at schools like Stanford, to make sure that the faculty and the students knew on campus they didn't want you to use the term American, because it might be offensive to someone who's not from here. Or, someone comes from their lacrosse practice and a couple of students are walking across campus and it might be some gals, some girls, and they might say, hey, girlfriend, how was the lacrosse game? How did that go? Or, hey, guy, leaving the lacrosse practice. Hey, guy, how was your game this weekend? Now, this started a while ago, by the way. I remember when Nancy Pelosi was House Speaker, I think for the second time, the House rules. Now, it wasn't enforced because, again, it's nuts. They didn't want members of Congress saying the terms granddaughter, grandson, grandfather, grandmother, husband, wife. So, if you're a member of Congress from New Jersey and you see your colleague from New Hampshire and you know that, and the colleague's a friend of yours and you know that their granddaughter or grandson is going to, I don't know, throw out a college, is going to UMass Amherst and they had a big game this weekend, you weren't supposed to be able to say in Congress to the member of Congress, hey, how did your granddaughter do in that game this weekend at UMass? I know it was a big game. You're excited about a big hockey game. How'd she do? No, you can't say those. So I really think this is nuts. And I think it's gone away for the most part, but apparently in Wisconsin it hasn't. So there you go, governor of Wisconsin. So fight on, I guess. And oh my goodness, feelings. Oh my goodness, everyone's feelings. I'm still. I said to a buddy this morning. I don't know if you're aware of this. This is fact. This is local. This when November 5th happened. I don't know if you remember, but there was an election on November 5th, and we weren't supposed to know the results. All the polls said for weeks or months who won. We knew that night Trump beat Harris in both the Electoral College, which was much higher than they thought, and even the popular vote. But it was supposed to be too close to call. But if you remember that, within a day or two of Tuesday night, November 5th, I have a friend who works for a regional bank. I am not going to say who the friend is, and I'm not going to say the bank. But it's a regional bank, like all banks are right now, right? I mean, like hospitals are buying up hospitals in New Hampshire. Bigger banks are buying the local banks that have been around 10, 20 years. So it's business. But the CEO of this out-of-state bank sent an email to all employees, including New Hampshire, basically saying the shocking results of November 5th. This terrible thing that's happened. And if you need some time off this week from the job, you can take a few days for grief counseling. We're going to provide counselors for you to get through this. This was a bank, adults, because the election might not have gone their way. I can understand the kiddies in college getting grief counselors on Tuesday or Wednesday if they couldn't handle the results. But this is an election. People win, they lose, but it's an election. My only question was with that bank, and it's a very logical one. I'm sorry. I was always the commonsensical pain in the neck in the classroom or the living room. Let me just ask you a question. If Harris had won the election, would the same bank CEO been sending out an email of grieving and despair because of the election results and grief counselors were available and you could take some paid time off if you're having a hard time coping with the results? I don't think they would have. I'm not sure. I don't think they would have. So, I don't know. The train rolls on. I don't hold all the answers, but I do think that I think people that are look at it's been a fast and furious, month and a few days for the first term. I've never seen anything like it. John Decker, our White House correspondent, who's covered several presidents, has never seen anything like it. But obviously, President Trump, in his second term, had time to think about it. They came in ready. He was making his cabinet nominations before he even took the oath of office, and they've come out swinging, and they're making, as he said, we made promises. They're going to make change, and they're making change. And a lot of people, again, who liked everything the way it was, and maybe that's the only way I can come up with logically, the only way that Joe Biden was able to pull it off, half asleep at the switch. The only way he was able to pull it off is people did not want change. The people who were part of the Biden base of support, the liberal side of the aisle, they didn't want change. They didn't want change at the southwest border. They didn't want to round up criminals who were illegal migrants in cities who had been roaming free, committing felony after felony after felony in sanctuary cities. They didn't want to change the immigration policies. They didn't want to tighten the southwest border. They didn't want to cut and trim Washington. They didn't want to shake things up. They didn't want to make federal workers get back to work. They didn't want any review of the waste and spending in Washington. They didn't want change at all. And that's the only way I can conclude the last 4 years, because certainly the Biden administration could have taken action in a New York second at the border. They could have shut down the border for real. They could have rounded up criminals in American cities who are being let go by judges in sanctuary cities without detention and given and without even any bail. Just nope. You robbed a bank. You allegedly raped this woman. I don't care. You're a migrant seeking asylum. You can go free. You beat up some police officers. Go ahead. You can go free. They didn't want change. They liked it the way it was because Joe Biden and his administration could have done a lot there real quick. But no, they chose not to. And it was a choice. Life's about choices. I get it. Hey, Alexa. Hey, Google, play the Pulse of an H. What's going on with the economy? Doug Tangton, World Market Advisors, coming up. Top of the 10 o'clock, J Dog. We're going to introduce you to a young person, J Dog, she won something recently. I'm not sure. Miss Capital Area. Morgan's going to say hi, and then we're going to say hi to Matt Mayberry, New Hampshire Home Builders. We're going to say hi to another home builder in the 11 o'clock hour, Jesse with Outside In Construction. The home show's coming up this weekend, right? This weekend. And we're going to a lot more coming up. Plus, in the next hour, more of my one-on-one exclusive interview with Caroline Leavitt, White House press secretary, this morning out of the gate fresh, talking about the showdown between Governor Mills and President Trump, the Governor Mills of Maine. She even answered is going to talk a little about the Governor Mills proposed floating windmills in the Gulf of Maine that President Trump has ordered not happening under executive order, and the New Hampshire House this past week voting to roll back any proposed leases or windmills in the Gulf of Maine, which is a really good thing for the Gulf of Maine in terms of the maritime habitat, the fishermen, the whales. If you like whales, it's a good thing. Don't whine and cry. Talk about a scam. Windmills, biggest scam I've ever seen. Show me any that are still working. The ones on land that get broken, they just sit there like a big ghost town up in states of, like the state of Maine up near Ellsworth, right on the hill. No one's been there for years. These huge windmills that someone had their pockets lined with a lot of money. So that's good news. All right. Hey, Alexa, hey, Google, play the Pulse of an H. Jack Heath, J-Dog on the boards. Back in a few. All right, we are back on this Monday. Milder temperatures this week, and Doug Tengden, our world market advisor, economist out there, tuning in and checking in. And Doug, I was speaking with a buddy of mine who's quite a very sharp business mind, and I asked him, is it just me, or is he sensing too that regardless of politics locally or nationally, that 2025 is beginning to feel like things are tightening and the economy is not really boding well for consumers right now. I'm watching retailers, their forecast. I'm talking to builders and realtors. And even though we're in a bubble here, it just feels like the economy's not on a great path. Tell me I'm right or wrong. Yeah, but elaborate because tell me where things are at when May or June roll around before the summer. Yeah, yeah. Well, what? Yeah, right. Well, I guess nothing is, and history does repeat itself. But we have a $36 trillion debt. I heard one of the Trump folks on the economy say to an interviewer, ask this question: do you realize we pay more in interest on our debt than the entire defense budget? Is that true? Yeah. Well, yeah. Right. Well, what I worry about though is everyday prices still being high, and what I worry about is on the local front. Like when one barometer you always see is still real estate. Now we are an outlier. The home show's coming up this week. I talked to builders. They're building, especially anything near the coast, but anything in New Hampshire in a nice area, nice town. Lakes region is booming in terms of new homes still, mostly from out of staters. And some point you think that line slows. But I look at banks and I look at small business loans and I look at the aggressiveness of business owners as a barometer, small independent business owners. Are they hiring? Are they bullish or are they bearish? And then if you're a homeowner and you wanted to go, get a mortgage, are banks, local banks eager to make that loan? Or do they start to look for reasons to drag their feet? In other words, I look for those activities. What are you seeing on those fronts? Yeah, no, no. I've talked to home builders in this area because the home show this week and, in Lakes region, for example, Alton, Moultonboro, Tuftonboro, things are still popping. Home builders are out 2 or 3 years on new projects. Seacoast, they're still popping. I don't know about other areas, but when I start to hear, you know, we had a realtor on my show Friday from Florida, and they're booming down there in new housing inventory, but the prices overall are down because there's more inventory in the market than there are buyers quick to move. And here we have the opposite. We don't have enough inventory. But when I start to hear, for example, that a home in Portsmouth goes on the market, albeit overpriced, but it's the market, and then 30 or 60 days, it's still there with a price reduction, or other houses now. So people move into Port. I'm just using Portsmouth as an example because it's one of the hottest housing markets per capita, probably in New England. If all of a sudden there's 6 or 7 homes in that category that are all on at the same time, that's when I start to see real consumer pullback. We're not seeing that yet, though. I don't. No offense. No offense to the shipyard. I'm a huge fan, and all the people I know. I know a few. I mean, I'm a huge fan of the opportunities there. But the people buying $2.5 million condos in Portsmouth are not shipyard workers. Yeah, I mean, like the restaurants, the coffee shops, but I'm just saying. Oh, South Burlington. I remember when they first went in there when I was there. All right, Doug, thank you. Doug, worldmarketadvisors.com. Doug Tengden, thank you, Doug. All right, coming up, we'll introduce you to an outstanding young person. Also, more of my interview with White House Press Secretary this morning live, Caroline Levitt, talking about the standoff between President Trump and Governor Mills of Maine. That's coming up. Hey, Alexa. Hey, Google, play the Pulse of an Age. Back in a few.